Okay, we're streaming there. We look good.
Nice.
Where's everybody from? Use the chat today, guys. We're gonna have moderators here as well to answer any questions. Please ask as many questions as you want throughout. We'll be pretty active there. Who joined last time? I'd like to see who joined here.
So we have like double the attendees as last time. So we have good turnout today.
Yeah,
Still coming in.
I'll wait a couple minutes for people to start joining in here.
Matt, you remember that guy from the Czech Republic we met with David like a million years ago?
Yeah,
He had a webinar yesterday
did he?
and it was
He's
his
got a cool
time. It
company.
was 8 a.m. here. I was thinking about that yesterday. I'm like, damn, that's early, David. But then I realized that our 11 o'clock start time Eastern is probably also kind of like doing the West Coast the same. So I wonder if there's any West Coasters out there.
Yeah, we had some last time from California.
There's like a heavy concentration of government contractors in like Denver, Boulder
Oh
area.
yeah, there's a ton.
Bunch of data centers.
That and military presence too.
Hmm.
Okay, I see we have some people joining on LinkedIn, YouTube.
Cool.
Cool. Well, guys, if you can send in the Q&A section here on Zoom, um, tell us where you're from. There's not really a chat, but there's a Q&A, so we'll just answer it. Arizona, Vinton.
I was gonna say Arizona. I was born in Tucson, at Fort Huachuca. That's like southern Arizona, um, almost Mexico.
Scott C's from Vieira, Florida. Very nice.
Yes, my dad was in the army. Yeah.
Cool. Well, we can probably get started here. I think people will pour in as we go. So what we'll do to start is we'll just preface with who we are. We're Network Depot. I'll stop and answer this real quick. Jasmine says they're from Bentonville, Illinois. Cool, all over the place. Well, we're headquartered in Washington, D.C., of course. We have a couple office locations there, one in Herndon, Virginia, which is our main fulfillment center, then our office in the Reagan building. The NAGC has asked us to talk today about CMMC, just like we did 2 weeks ago. Apparently, it's a hot topic, Chris. We've got a bunch of questions from
Yeah.
existing clients. We got a bunch of questions from new prospective clients about CMMC, what it is, who's it for, why does it exist, when is it actually mandatory? Apparently, nobody knows. It looks like a lot of companies out there that should know what they're doing that provide the CMMC remediation services don't really know. So there's a lot up in the air. Last webinar that we had 2 weeks ago, which is posted on our YouTube channel, guys, we'll have that sent out via email today if you'd like to rewatch it. We talk a little bit about the what it is and the whys. Today we're going to focus a little bit more on the environments themselves, not necessarily yeah, Scott, we're going to send that out. We are going to talk today about not necessarily remediation, but more about building what the right infrastructure should look like for your business. And it depends on each business, it varies. But there are going to be three options we're going to talk about today. Chris is going to get right into those.
Yeah.
But I want to preface as to why. Chris, tell us why it matters so much, where your environment sits and what it's going to affect in the long run.
Yeah, well, I want to take like a quick second, give a shout out to the NAGC, National Association of Government Contractors. They're an awesome organization. I think they're the largest representation of government contractors in the country. We've been kind of like in heavy dialogue with them over the summer, last summer, leading up to CFR Rule 48, which is like CMMC. Up until November 10th, it was like, okay, now it's active. So kind of like leading up to that, I think they were being very proactive and reached out to us and said, "Hey, our members are asking about this stuff. You guys mind, hosting some webinars and teaching them about it?" And so this is a three-part series. This is session two, so we're a little bit in the meat of it, and trying to kind of level set everybody. The first session was mostly about the process of, okay, do I need CMMC level one? Well, that's an easier runway. Do I need CMMC level two? That's likely everybody here. That's what you're after. How to manage and handle CUI. That's going to start popping up on contracts. If it hasn't already for you, you're going to begin seeing it. And so it is a hot topic. I mean, you are not eligible to bid on a government contract, a DoW government contract without this.
Yeah, without the compliance.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a grace period that's been going on since November 10th, but it's catching hold, and we have a bunch of government contractors as clients, just kind of naturally being here in DC, and so they rely on us pretty heavily for this. They're like, I don't know what this is, can you guys help me? And yes, we can. So we about 7 years ago, when CMMC came on the scene, became what's called an RPO, which means we're legally allowed to give advice about CMMC readiness. And so we've been doing this for a little while, and so we're very happy to talk to you guys today. The third webinar is going to be in 2 weeks, and so far, Matt's had a lot of one-on-one conversations with the attendees of the first one.
Yeah, had about
You know,
15 of those the past
yeah,
couple
something like
weeks.
that. So if you do have any kind of like one-on-one type questions after this, like, okay, that all sounds great, Chris, but at some point I'm gonna need to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
Happy to do that. Anyway, like Matt said, we're gonna be kind of monitoring. Well, we aren't gonna be. We're gonna be talking, but our moderator is gonna be monitoring the chat and trying to answer some questions kind of live for you. But then, at the pause of each section, we're going to stop and answer some Q&A. So that's the goal for today, is to cover kind of the three most popular methods of designing your infrastructure to handle CUI. And so if you're like most of the people Matt's talked to so far, you're a smaller government contractor, under 50 employees, and you're going from this to I want to be able to handle CUI. And there's really three kind of schools of thought and how you would go about setting that up. And it's a building stage. I think a lot of people get lost in that term remediation. If you don't have a current kind of setup to handle FCI or CUI, or you don't have a SOC or ISO compliance right now, chances are it's mostly building and not remediation. So that's what we're going to focus on today, and kind of walk through it in detail. That's our goal, is to answer, what do I do next? You should have that answer by the end of today.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Chris, so let's start with the first one. Maybe we should lay out what the three are first, and then we'll just
Yeah.
start with number one.
Yeah, it's
So
so you guys are probably, well, Matt, I'll let you kind of introduce the three.
yeah, thanks, Chris. There's three different environments that we generally speak of. I'm sure there's maybe some more niche ones we could talk about, but the three main ones we're going to talk about today. Number one is Prevail. I'm sure you guys have heard of Prevail. Number two is Microsoft GCC, so Microsoft's Government Cloud / GCC High. And the third one is Microsoft GCC plus a VDI, so a virtual desktop system. Chris, let's talk about Prevail first. Who's it
Yeah, man.
for? Who is it not for?
Yeah. So Prevail is a great option. Essentially, what Prevail is, if you don't already know it, just Google it. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's the easiest one we're going to explain today. Okay. Essentially, what it is a email and file platform that sits on top of your existing 365 environment. Most of you guys are probably already in 365 commercial. And so what Prevail does is it allows you to essentially stand up email and file repositories to handle CUI. It's FedRAMP moderate compliant, so you're chill keeping your stuff there, and you don't have to migrate anything. You don't have to really change your process too much. And it's only 36 bucks a mailbox, 36 bucks a user. So it's a very attractive option, mostly for smaller government contractors looking to stand up an enclave, which is, you look at your org chart, let's say you're a 10-person government this works well with an example. So let's say you're a 10-person government contractor. Three of your staff might handle CUI, which I don't know, man. Like, I don't know how much to level set this conversation. When I say that you could do a whole web series on acronyms, but CUI, that's the one that you should get out of this, is controlled unclassified information. That's what CMMC level 2 is built and designed to control the flow of CUI. And maybe I'll level set this a little bit. CMMC level 1, you're going to see that on almost every government contract. That's like good housekeeping. Okay, there's 14 controls in CMMC level 1. It's built and designed to handle FCI, which is federal contract information. It's less sensitive data. Okay. And that's like, you should be pretty close to that already, hopefully. Just like setting up MFA, having your kind of like I say, good housekeeping. We're an IT company, but like it's the basics for us, getting somebody to be CMMC level 1. CMMC level 2 is 110 controls. And a little sneaky of the government, it's 110 controls with 320 sub-objectives. Okay, so it's not 110 yeses, it's 320 yeses. It's a longer runway. So it's not gonna be a light switch. And so a lot of our government contractors, either prospects that we're talking to and kind of bringing into Network Depot, along with our current contractors, the largest piece of that runway is building the infrastructure to handle CUI. Okay, and it's nothing that, well, it's nothing that you should try to handle alone. Okay, and so that's what we're gonna be covering today. That's the biggest piece of the runway for you. So let's shorten it. Like that's kind of the name of the game. Let's shorten that piece of runway. Most people come to us. They're like, I need CMMC tomorrow or yesterday, and well, okay, so speed is a factor here. So Prevail is a quick one. Prevail is like you go out, you sign up, and you have a new email address, and that's where you handle all your CUI. And if it contains files that have CUI, well, then you have a file repository right there.
Hmm.
Very, very simple. Okay. It doesn't take the burden off of documentation or policies or proving that you're compliant, but it is a great way to kind of pretty quickly solve that. I have a container for this stuff, and
Right.
that container, when I say enclave, it just means a subset of your staff would have uh, kind of like your commercial business is running over here, and here's your secure, able to handle CUI infrastructure, and that's an enclave. So that's Prevail. I mean, we can get more into it. I don't want to like keep talking at you guys, but that's Prevail. It's a nice, easy setup.
Cheap.
We're a Prevail partner.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna knock it. So I mean, Matt, I don't know if you want the format to be like kind of pros and cons here, but
Yeah, let's talk about the pros. The pros are it's quick to spin up. It's
mhm,
fairly inexpensive if you limit the scope of it, meaning just a couple licenses. You are doubling up on licensing though. So you will need your Microsoft license and the Prevail license. It's about 36 bucks a mailbox
mhm.
slash file repository. It's a combination. What are the negatives, Chris? Who would it not apply for?
Well, the negatives is and I want this. I said this last time, so I'll repeat it. The name of the game in becoming CMMC compliant. Most people think, I need this. I need to pass 110 controls. That's not necessarily the first question you should be asking yourself. The first question you should be asking yourself is, how do I limit scope? Okay, that is the name of the game. That's going to determine cost. That's going to determine the speed in which you can become compliant and get to audit. And that's also going to lessen the burden of ongoing maintaining compliance. Okay.
Hmm.
And that's a big piece. You have to get certified every 3 years. for level two, and you have to do a
Plus a yearly self audit.
self attestation every year. And it's not like I say self attestation, and most people think it's a joke. It's like, okay, yeah, I can say I can do that. But there's scary false claims acts. If you're representing that you can handle CUI and you get audited, kind of in the middle of that 3 year and you're found non-compliant, well, they're going to shut your business down and you're going to be found,
In
guilty of
violation of the FCA.
the false claim. And that happens, dude. And it's the owner of the business who is ultimately responsible
Yeah, I saw a
for
crazy
signing off on
stat
that.
a couple weeks ago, right after our first webinar, that there were more False Claim Act violations than people who had gotten their audits passed in the past 6 months or something crazy like that. It's
Well,
wild.
government contractors, you guys are soft targets. Okay, call it bluntly. You guys are soft targets. You are the chinks in the armor of national security. So if, this works well with an example, but if a prime bids on a contract, wins it, they hire a sub, okay, tight, like that's probably a pretty large company, and then it comes to you. Okay, maybe you're a sub of a sub of a sub, and it comes to you. That's the attack vector, and so your weaknesses expose that entire tree,
Mhm.
and so you guys are more likely the target. It's not the Booz Allens, it's not the Deloitte, it's not the Whiting Turners or Clark Construction. If you're in that business, it's not the mechanical engineers that subcontracted to you. It's you. Uh, that that is a focal point for the government and why they're insisting on this, okay, and why they're pressing this. It's exposing weaknesses through this auditing process. This is nothing new, okay? CMMC is an evolution of NIST 800-171, which was an evolution from DFARS. So DFARS to NIST to CMMC. It's nothing new that the government is regulating this security stuff. But it is something new that there are 100, 200,000 government contractors for the DoW right now. So when follow the money, if you hear that, well, the government is going to find you, fine you, and collect money. So it's like they're almost like doubly incentivized to make sure that you guys are secure.
Right. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, the smaller your scope, the cheaper and faster your path to certification. Okay. The bigger your scope, the more you have to secure, document, prove every single year. So, the first and foremost question isn't how do we meet the 110 controls? It's how do we shrink the surface that we have to protect? And that, like, I can't stress that hard enough. And that's going to really dictate which option you should go with. And Prevail, kind of getting back to that, Prevail is an easy one to set up. But watch this. Say, let's go back to the 10-person organization example. 3 of your staff might touch CUI. So you go out and you get 3 Prevail licenses. Okay. 3 new mailboxes and file repositories for CUI. Great. It's all contained. However, those are new email addresses. You're still keeping concurrent, like m.bean@networkdepot.com is still in existence, right? Along with your Prevail one. So your primes are emailing that. They don't know that you have this Prevail one. So boom, they email m.bean and CUIs in your commercial. Already broke. The system already broke. And so you would still need to take measures to harden the environment you thought you left out of scope. Okay. And you'd have to set that up on Intune Defender. You'd have to set that up on Purview with DLP, and you'd have to have sensitivity labeling that, like, oh shit, CUI just came into this inbox. What do I do? I guess forward it over to my Prevail. The system already broke. And you also didn't really limit the scope like you thought you did. And that's called scope creep, or that's called configuration drift, or that's called any number of things. It just gets messy. Okay. It bloats the surface area past where you thought that you had kind of cornered it. And that's what we've seen. That's what our auditors have seen. So that's kind of like
It-
chronologically the
yeah.
first weakness of that solution.
It also brings the devices into scope, which is a big,
That's the
one of the,
second one.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
probably one of the biggest ones.
Yeah. Anything you guys can do, I can't stress this enough. Hopefully you're joining this webinar because you're looking for some advice. So I'll give it. If you can create a solution that drops your devices out of scope, I'm talking about your workstations, your laptops. If your scope boundary can leave those out, you you won. You won the game. And you have, I don't want to say silver bullet, but you have a clear path to compliance, a very easy audit in front of you, and a very easy 3 years of maintaining that compliance. I don't want to say easy, but drastically, orders of magnitude easier, less expensive as well. So yeah, if you can drop those devices out of scope, you should be looking at that solution. And that's going to be our third solution, which is a VDI, but a virtual desktop infrastructure. But that's what I'm going to walk through today. 3 infrastructure approaches, different scopes, different costs, different trade-offs. And hopefully by the end of this session, you'll know which path makes the most sense for your organization, or at least kind of know the questions to ask. So that's the goal of today. But keeping your devices in scope, that is something that Prevail does not help with.
Yeah, at
Okay.
all.
I've been in those audits, and people think that they've created this hard boundary, this hard enclave. And the C3PAO, who's the certified third party assessor organization, who's eventually going to give you the stamp of, yes, you are CMMC compliant. That company is not going to like turn a blind eye to your devices. They're going to be looking at it. They're going to be asking for evidence about it, and they're going to be looking for how you are dealing with CUI potentially being on your devices. So
Great.
Prevail is an easy one, but like I think it kind of fails. Now I want to talk through again, kind of chronologically about Prevail. Okay. It's going to come in, CUI is going to come in to probably your commercial. So it already kind of broke. But let's just say you've kept everything, you've alerted everybody. Send CUI to this new email address, m.bean@networkdepot.prevail.com. And they follow it and they do it. And all the CUI flows into that inbox that it's supposed to flow into. Okay. Let's just say that. You're still going to have to communicate back to them, and you're still going to have to communicate to your subs. And if they don't have a Prevail inbox as well, they're going to get an email. And this has happened like during the Prevail demo, the sales guy, like I'm like, send me an email from Prevail. I want to see what it looks like. Okay. And so he sent an email, and I open it up in my Outlook, and it's, I just said, hey, just say, hey, Chris. So he sends me an email. It says, hey, Chris, except it doesn't say, hey, Chris, it's a link. And it says, check this check this email. Click the link. Fair enough. Fair enough. Launches a website. I go into that website, and it puts me through this authentication process that was a real pain in the ass. Okay. And so if you are messaging other orgs, either up or downstream from your Prevail mailbox, you've just made their lives a little harder. It's not the end of the world, right? But if you're communicating with like pretty regularly with those people, it
Could
only
be a
really
super annoying.
works well if it's Prevail to Prevail. Um, and they're growing. It's a pretty common. There's a reason we're starting with it. It's a pretty common option, and it's growing so in popularity. So, you have a chance that they might have a Prevail account as well. But that, kind of chronologically, that's how that system works.
Scott just asked, is there preference on operating system to use? Yes, Windows. The government
Windows.
prefers Windows. It's kind of been their preference forever. So this stuff just runs smoothest. The next that we talk about, Scott, are going to be Microsoft-based programs. So their
Mhm.
Office 365, the operating systems obviously tie in much easier when it's the same company. We have
I'm
a
on a
government
Mac right
contract. Yeah,
now.
so am I. We have government
I have
contract
my
with
iPad
clients
right
that are,
here. I'm a Mac guy, but
yeah.
the policies that you need to push, really simply, the policies that you need to push. Um, I don't want to get too technical on this. I had a schedule, but in order to defend your devices, if your devices are still in scope, in order to harden those devices to meet CMMC compliance, you're going to need to use tools. And those tools are way easier when it's Windows to Windows. When it's Windows to Mac, Intune, Entra, Defender, which are all kind of in that, in that managing of the device line, it doesn't work well. In fact, it doesn't work with Macs. You would have to use a third party and we use Mosile to kind of mirror the Intune policies, the Entra policies, the conditional access policies. For instance, I'll give you an example. This all works best with examples. So I'll give you an example. If your devices are in scope, you're going to get to a point in the CMMC audit. It's called the media protection family. There's 14 families of controls. So the 110 controls are spread out over 14 families or control groups. And one of them is media protection. And in that, they're going to say, okay, do you have the ability to download CUI onto your laptop and put it on an external media device, a thumb drive? Well, the way that you would say, no, I don't. I don't have that ability. Look, I have this policy, that's being enforced. It's preventing me from doing that. Well, that policy is being pushed from Entra, from Intune, onto Defender, onto your workstation. If you have a Mac, it doesn't work as well. That policy, you would need to have a workaround RMM, remote monitoring and management tool to enforce that policy. And so it's a long answer, but a lot of people try to make Macs work in this environment, and God bless them.
We have a
We've done
client that
it,
does.
but
It's
I
very
wouldn't
big.
wouldn't exactly. Yeah, we have two
Yeah,
clients who are all Mac.
yeah,
I
that's right.
wouldn't exactly recommend it, but a mixed environment is the worst. Mac is the second worst. Mac is the second worst, and then Windows is the best. So yeah,
Great. Well, let's move on to the GCC. Let's talk about that
yeah,
one. And the agenda for the next 20 minutes, guys, we're going to talk 10 minutes on GCC, 10 minutes on GCC VDI, maybe 15 there. And then the door will just be open for questions. We'll be done by the end of the hour.
yeah. I also want to note, guys, and I'm going to kind of weave this through this conversation. I don't think that you can talk about your potential future workplace without talking about AI. If you are in Prevail, there's no AI, there's no Copilot in there. There's no summarizing, you know, emails. There's no drafting of emails, no summarizing docs. AI doesn't live there.
Meeting recording, none of that stuff.
Yeah, and so you're foregoing that potential future utilization of AI by going to Prevail. Um, I don't want to rush through this, guys. Um, my goal, our goal, no joke, is to answer all your questions. You should leave here with a very good idea of what path you're going to choose. And so I want to address it thoroughly. Okay. And one of the hot topics that always comes up in discussion, almost never talked about during the thought process beforehand, but always comes up when we start implementing, is third-party applications. Matt, let's focus a little bit on third-party line of business apps, and this is going to come into play for the rest of the call as well.
Yeah. You want to use
Matt,
that example we talked about
yeah,
yesterday?
you want to use
Yeah.
it?
So I met with an engineering firm. Hopefully, I'm on this call today. That'd be cool. That was on our last webinar 2 weeks ago. They are a sub of a sub of a sub of a very large prime. And part of their contract is they just build bolts for aircraft carriers or something, but it's considered ITAR. So they were told that you're handling ITAR, get compliant. And because they're at the bottom of the chain, the question was, this is 10% of our business. Do we really want to invest all the money into this to get compliant?
Sure.
How off are we from that? And can we use our line of business apps to work on this? We have
It's
our
like a CAD
tools.
software, like
Yeah,
you guys are probably like, I would think a large portion of you guys would be in the manufacturing business. So your line of business app is like a CAD software, design software, Bluebeam,
Bluebeam.
something, along those lines that helps you manufacture something. Yeah.
Yeah,
What does Prevail do about that?
yeah, absolutely nothing. You can't host that application in there.
Mm-mm.
Prevail is just for the emails and files.
So you would need another solution for that. And that just like already kind of convolutes that Prevail method. Prevail is really, really solid for email and files.
Yeah, but that's the extent of the scope.
Mm,
That's it.
yeah.
So
This
that's all you
third party
need.
line of business apps, you got it like e- email and files are the easy ones, right? And so you don't want to focus on the easy ones. You want to focus on the gotchas, right? that's where your attention should be if you want this to go smoothly. So focus on those third-party apps, and this next solution, which is GCC, addresses that, largely addresses that. Um, so GCC is the government community cloud. It is acceptable for CMMC level 2. And it's not GCC high. Okay, so when you they're not the same. It's GCC, and then you have GCC high. And essentially what it is it's Azure. Okay, and it just lives on more secure servers and more secure data centers managed by more secure human beings. Background checked, U.S. citizens. So okay, it kind of has the government's blessing. It's FedRAMP moderate compliant, and so your stuff can live on there, and you're good. GCC is not a platform. I think this is the biggest misconception that I hear. GCC is not necessarily a platform. GCC is Microsoft 365's suite in those more secure data centers. Okay, so
Same
it's
exact thing.
not it would be incorrect to say I'm going to move this line of business app onto the GCC servers. That's like nonsensical. It's you would move it onto the Azure government cloud, not GCC. GCC is just Microsoft 365. And instead of an E5 license, you have a G5 license. Okay, that's what GCC is. But it handles your email, it handles your files, it handles SharePoint, it handles OneDrive, Teams. The whole Microsoft suite is now in a more secure place. And so cool, the government says you're fine to operate in there. And so that's pretty attractive for companies who aren't necessarily looking for an enclave solution. They're looking for, I have 10 people in my staff, like over half of them might touch CUI at some point. Well, then maybe it makes sense to move the whole business over to the G licensing, the GCC high licensing. And there is a cost to that. Like an E5 license might be, what is it now?
57, moving to
50 bucks,
60.
yeah,
Yeah.
something like that. And this is going to have like a 10-15% lift. So, depending on if you go annual or monthly. So it's a more expensive license, but like, it's not like a huge burden. It could be argued that Prevail would be a larger burden because you're paying for 36 bucks for Prevail, plus you're still keeping your E5. So you're not, for those people who would have two, you're paying for both.
Doubling up.
Yeah. But at GCC, it's if you're foregoing your commercial and just moving everybody over to GCC, which is the common one that we see, is you're not holding on to your commercial licensing. You're moving to the government licensing. So that's GCC, and it's definitely a solid option, even financially. Setting it up is pretty easy. It looks and feels pretty much identical to commercial. Your users are not going to need trained on this. It's the same interface. It's just Copilot lives there, Teams lives there. It's just a little bit more secure.
Cool. Well, let's talk
Yeah.
about who it's for. Obviously, it's for the company that wants to move almost entirely to that platform. So 10-person company, you got 7 or 8 people that want to move, that want to handle CUI. Probably makes sense to move everyone to the G licensing.
Hmm.
Let's talk about who it's not for. And
Yeah,
then
it's not really for the enclave folks on the call. It's for the, hey, I want to move to GCC. That's like everybody. It just makes sense that everybody would move over there. And maybe that sounds like, everybody moving over there, that's going to be expensive. It's going to be more of a lift. And it sounds worse, but it's actually cleaner for compliance because you're not trying to maintain a boundary inside of your own organization. It keeps everybody up to those same standards. Now, what it doesn't do is it doesn't drop out your laptops. So you're still
let's
opening up
go.
your laptop in the morning and you're working as normal. It's basically the same workflow as Microsoft 365 commercial. And therefore, your laptops are accessing CUI. Therefore, your laptops remain in scope. Therefore, the scope remains large.
Yeah. What I think a quick thing to throw in here is pretty important that we came across with multiple clients that we signed up last year. The IT provider that people had that was not compliant with CMMC was working on
Yeah.
one of these well, at the time they were a prospective client and they were in Prevail. And that MSP, that IT company that was outsourced, that they were working with to manage their day-to-day help desk tickets, that kind of thing, they fall into scope if your laptops are in scope because they have to log into those laptops. And and what does that do? You immediately fail the audit if that IT provider is working on those and they're not CMMC compliant themselves. And so part of the reason that it's important to drop the workstations out of scope, like we said before, you limit the scope, you limit the burden that the audit has on your company, you limit the chances that you fall out of compliance during your 3-year term of compliance. So it's pretty important that we try and limit that as much as we possibly can. Rick had a question real quick, Chris, before we get further into GCC. Is Prevail for the
Okay.
Enclave folks? He said, I thought Prevail was an overlay on your existing email domain, didn't require a separate email address.
If you're building an enclave, it means that you're still doing commercial business, right? Otherwise, you would just, you would just go GCC. So, an enclave, the only reason you would do that is because like the government is only part of your business. Therefore, the enclave would have to be part of your business. And so if you're keeping that person active on the commercial side as well, you would want to keep their commercial email address,
Active.
active as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rather than migrating it to GCC as well.
Yeah. It doesn't merge with your Outlook right now. There's no like merge to it. It's a new email. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like Chris said, like .prevail.com. He said his business model is exactly as he described in the engineering scenario, a very small
Hmm.
part of their business. That's very common. I think that most people on these calls, most people that I've talked to in the past 2 weeks have been in that same scenario where
Hmm.
maybe Prevail makes sense there. That stay on for the next 15 minutes because when we talk about the VDI system, it's going to really make sense. Your third-party applications that work on that build molds or build bolts or triggers or whatever it is that might be ITAR, that is CUI controlled information that needs to be locked down as well. And so we'll talk about that in a second. It's very important because that is part of the scope.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, let's get further into GCC. Chris, you had
Yeah,
some
let's do it. Let's do it. So GCC is it brings in it brings your business, to kind of rising tide. Kind of level sets everybody in your org is using the same platform, and it I think that that's easier from the user perspective and also from the compliance like burden of proof and evidence if everybody has the same kind of level set licensing and way of doing business, and you have the same configs being pushed down to everybody, um, that makes things way easier. Now, what GCC doesn't do is it doesn't solve necessarily the third party line of business app dilemma of, hey, I have, like I think it was Rick, the example where you'd have a third party line of business app where you have
Mhm.
CUI that might flow into that. You go into GCC doesn't solve that. Like CUI is still in this, uncontrolled environment. And I want to focus on this and talk like real world, kind of like a little nerdy for a moment. If you have a piece of software or a line of business application that handles CUI, that needs to be FedRAMP compliant or FedRAMP moderate equivalent. Now, what that means, if you go on FedRAMP, the marketplace right now, and you go search for that line of business app and it's not there, that means it's not on the marketplace. It's not FedRAMP compliant, but it's worth asking that vendor if it's FedRAMP moderate equivalent. Okay. Pretty big distinction. Don't be afraid if you go to the marketplace and you search for your Bluebeam-esque design CAD file line of business app and it's not there. Panic for a moment, then go ask them. Most most companies, they just like you, they're not doing enough business with the government to go through that FedRAMP compliant process. It's takes forever. And I wouldn't really trust them if they say, oh, it's on our roadmap to become this. It's on it's on a lot of people's roadmaps, and it takes years. And large companies are going after this. Okay. So if you're dealing with a line of business app that handles CUI and it's a small company, chances are they're last in line. So
Yeah, there's some that have FedRAMP approved stuff, like Salesforce, for example, has one. I believe CAD has one as well. There are a couple others we talked about yesterday, Chris, that had.
yeah, just a Google search would probably generate,
Yeah.
if it is or it isn't. But what you're looking for, and this goes back to the delineation between GCC and Azure Government. GCC is for your Microsoft licensing. Okay. So if your line of business app isn't FedRAMP compliant or moderate on its own, well, then it would have to move and migrate that instance onto Azure Government. And most line of business apps, you could do that. You could migrate that to Azure Government, and it sits on secure data centers, and therefore CUI is cool. You would still need, this is the nerdy part, you would still need most line of business apps, they're going to be sitting on Azure Government, so a secure environment, and they check that box. However, there are protocols in the back end that go check in with the mothership, that application's home for updates, or they're sending little updates, little packet updates. And because that connection exists, you don't control it, and it goes to a place that isn't FedRAMP compliant, well, then it doesn't matter if it's hosted on a secure place, because that unsecure connection exists. And so you'd have to turn off that external connection. And you can
Yeah, the
do
auto
that.
updates. Yeah.
You can do that. Uh, but just be cognizant of that. It's not like you set it over there and you're good. The auditor will come in and be like, okay, cool. Your stuff, your CUI is contained on that. Very good. Check mark. Now, what does that talk to?
Yeah.
Right?
And if it's locked down in that instance, you're safe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
correct. Correct. Now that does mean that product updates will be slower. They'll have to
Yeah.
release ones that are slower. It does get messy. That's why I'm focusing on it, because it does get messy. It's worth a call and to talk a little bit more through it.
Yeah.
It
There
is.
there are some very, very, very niche small line of business apps that may be custom that might not be capable of being hosted on Azure, but they're few and far between. 99% of everything is going to be capable of being hosted there.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, that covers GCC.
Yep.
I think we should talk about the GCC plus VDI, which is our preferred for several reasons, but it's our preferred method. We're not trying to sell you guys in any of these environments, really. We're just trying to explain as much as we possibly can about each of them. In our experience, this one has been our favorite. It's been the most favorable by the auditors, the smoothest to pass the audits. It drops the workstations out of scope. Chris, let's talk through it.
Yeah. If you guys don't know what a virtual desktop infrastructure is, a VDI, I'll explain it briefly, because that's what this section is. VDI has been around for a very long time. It has commonly been in larger organizations who want total control over their endpoints and their infrastructure. And so, again, I think this works well in an example. If you have a VDI set up, you and your users, you open up your laptop in the morning, you either click on an icon or you go to a browser. What that's going to do is it's going to launch a session from your laptop to wherever that VDI is hosted. Okay, just imagine that's a very secure connection, and that's being managed. In this case, we would recommend GCC, and so that's going to create a boundary around that infrastructure, and you have a secure connection to it, but you're working in that infrastructure. Okay. You have a virtual desktop in that infrastructure. And so controlling that virtual desktop is the name of the game. And if you have control over that, your laptop falls out of scope. You're not working on your laptop. You're working inside a session inside that cloud. That's a VDI. Okay, I'll pause there. I think most people probably know what it is, but um, what it does for you guys for CMMC purposes is it drops those laptops out of scope. Okay. Those audits go so quickly. It's what we've done. We have a VDI inside of GCC, kind of put
For
our money where our
ourselves.
mouth is. Yeah. And auditors love it. It satisfies a whole host of controls. You don't have to care too much about the laptop anymore. It's a terminal. It's a dummy session. It's a you take your laptop and throw it out the window, and it doesn't matter. There's no CUI on it. There's nothing on it. You're not processing really anything on that. When you're accessing that VDI, you set up a rule saying that you can't download anything to your local because it doesn't really see your local. You can't copy and paste stuff because it doesn't really see, it's not on your local. You can't put stuff on a thumb drive because it's not your local. It's fully contained up there. And therefore, your local machine does not matter at that point. In the eyes of the scope boundary, it doesn't matter anymore. In the eyes of the burden of proof, the burden of evidence that you need to provide, it doesn't matter anymore. And also, I mean, maybe this isn't a big deal for a 10-person org, but I just quoted a 700-person HVAC company out of Baltimore, 700 laptops. They're paying 2K per laptop right now, something like that on a 3-year replacement cycle. Okay, that's about 130 laptops a year, something like that. 230 laptops a year. And instead of paying $2,000 for the laptop, now they get a crappier laptop in the rising cost of RAM, but like crappier laptop for, 1,300 bucks, 1,400 bucks. You just saved $500 a laptop, $600 a laptop times your replacement cycle a year. That's, hundreds of thousands of dollars of hardware,
Yeah.
just yeah, and so you would want to take that into account. That's obviously the bigger you are, the bigger that number, but you could get crappier machines. So the cost of the laptop goes down. Um, yeah. You don't need to have hard policies on those laptops. I would still recommend it, but you don't need it. You
For
would need
CMMC
to,
purposes.
yeah, for CMMC purposes, you would just need to care about that VDI, produce evidence about that VDI, maintain that VDI, and you're good to go.
Hmm. Okay, let's talk about who that applies for. What are the upsides? What are the potential downsides of the
Sure.
VDI system?
So it's the most expensive to stand up. You would need a more mature company. This is kind of like uh, throwing us back to the first session here, but like step one in becoming CMMC compliant is talk to your MSP. If you have an MSP or an MSSP or like a cybersecurity company who you're currently partnering with, they are going to be the most heavily involved in this process of any of your vendors, potentially more involved than you will be. And so first step is to talk to them. And so if they've never set up a VDI, I would suggest talking to somebody who has. If they've never set up GCC or migrated to GCC or Azure Government, well, then I would suggest you talk to somebody who has. And so from like what to do next type thing, you can come out of this and be like, okay, I'm sold. VDI, like, it's marginally more than GCC. It's on average, 150 bucks a month per user or something like that, depending on compute, maybe less. And I'm sold. Let's do that. That sounds easy. Okay, well, who are you going to talk? Like make sure that you have somebody who knows how to manage that infrastructure. That would be a pitfall, getting down that road and realizing that you don't have anybody to manage it. So that would be a pitfall.
Okay, and the benefits obviously drops workstation out of scope,
Hmm.
makes the audit much, much, much easier, and then makes it so you don't really fall out of CMMC compliance during your term, which is a huge thing.
That's correct. And you also like you're living in a mic like we would recommend having that VDI in GCC, and you're living in a Microsoft environment, and so you can utilize AI just like normal. You can utilize
Yeah,
Copilot. You're
use
utilizing the
Teams,
Microsoft
use all that
tools to
stuff.
put up, guardrails on your AI. And part of this is you're gonna have to have AI policy. And so like setting up Purview and Defender to like put guardrails on your AI and what your users can copy and paste into ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and stuff like that. You're going to have that DLP policies to make sure that like CUI isn't leaking out, data tagging to make sure that it's being flagged and quarantined. You're going to have to set that up anyway. So you're biting off the Microsoft stack. You're biting off that environment. So just kind of logically, well, you want to live in that environment. And so that's kind of why I move away from Prevail. It's just because like I want that ecosystem. I want that ecosystem. I want to take advantage of that ecosystem. Um, so yeah, I like the VDI. It's for the user experience. It's nothing. It's simple. You need a good internet connection, but you need a good internet connection everywhere. So that's about it. The line of business apps, I will say, for the line of business apps, you might have to create two VDIs, one to your Microsoft Workplace and two for your CAD users. Like if you have a shop floor or something, going back to the Bolt manufacturer. If you have a shop floor and there's a dummy terminal workstation there, they're gonna have a VDI and it's gonna go directly to Azure Government, which is gonna be your line of business app. Great. I mean, it's still a controlled environment, and that workstation's not in scope, and that user doesn't know the difference. So
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we answered pretty much everything. Let's talk briefly about the assessment for each of them. What are the pitfalls of the assessments with Prevail, GCC, and GCC VDI? Which one goes smoothest? We kind of already touched on this, but just to end off with that note. And then, guys, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A. Send them all in here. We'd love to answer your questions. Um, Scott had a question real quick, and we'll just answer it. He said, "Is it VMware?" Very similar. It's similar to how it's like a virtual machine. It's just virtual desktop. So you can imagine if you're working from home and you open up the RDP session and you remote into your laptop at work. If you've ever done that before in the past, it's very similar to that. It's just what you're remoting into is Microsoft Azure's government cloud where that VDI lives. And
mhm.
Rick just asked, could you use a VDI solution in an enclave situation, i.e., locally hosted? In an enclave situation, is the user required to be physically at the terminal in the enclave, or are there RDP controls that can be implemented for remote access, i.e., VPN? Chris, do you want to take that one?
There's a few questions in there, Rick. I want to make sure I answer you,
Yeah,
just in case it applies to anybody else too.
I just sent that to
VDI
you.
in an enclave situation. When you say enclave, I'm reading it as skiff. Is that what you're referring to? Like a physical location that is cut off from the outside world?
He said
Yeah.
yes.
So enclave and skiff are two different things. So I'll touch on that. Enclave is just the means of segregating an environment. The the lasso around that environment. Everything kind of stays in there. It doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't mean a skiff. A skiff would be you know, a government facility where you have to drop your cell phone at the door. You go in, you go to work. You don't have access to the outside world type thing. That would be a skiff, and in which case you would have an on-prem local environment, and that's the only thing that you can access. So, like, I guess it's kind of as if you're working from home and had access to that skiff. That would be like, I guess, the most similar uh, comparison to a VDI. But a VDI, it could live anywhere. I mean, theoretically, a VDI could live on a server in your basement, but you know that's not FedRAMP compliant. So you want it living in a place that's FedRAMP compliant or FedRAMP moderate equivalent, which would the easy answer there is GCC. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So his second part of his question, he says, in an enclave situation, is the user required to be physically at the terminal in the enclave, or are there RDP controls that can be implemented for remote access? That's what we're talking about. So basically, your laptop would be not a Chromebook, but something just super cheap, just a flimsy little laptop. You're only using that to remote into the SCIF environment via Microsoft's government cloud. Yeah. So Enclave
Yeah.
is, yeah.
Yeah. Enclave and Skiff are they're two in terms of this conversation, two different things. But yeah, the the question was, my understanding of an enclave was similar to a SCIF in that if you had a secure room at your office with electronic entry, exit controls to log access, um, that would be a SCIF. You're cut off from the outside world. You can do anything from there. Um, what we're talking about a VDI is you can go anywhere. I go over to Matt's house, open my laptop, click on the
Yeah.
session, and I'm in GCC, a secure VDI environment.
Yes, Rick. It's basically the same thing but virtual. It's a virtually created skiff, if you
Yeah,
will.
a logic. He said so. An enclave is more logical segmentation, not physical, and
That's
that
right.
is correct.
That's right.
Yeah.
Vinton has a question too. He says a one man shop, scale up to 50 staff. Nice. 50 contractors. He's in tier one for CMMC, tier two compliance. He bids on contracts. CMMC three is a deep dive and deep investment. You can, however, leverage a subcontractor vendor. Use Kaseya. Cool. Very cool. Congrats.
I think the question here is maybe a zoom out on CMMC level one, two, and three. Okay, I haven't addressed three. Three is almost exclusively for contracts that require ITAR or companies who require ITAR. We don't see that a whole hell of a lot, okay? But none of these answers, well, the VDI is an okay answer, but the VDI would have to be in GCC high, and the GCC is an acceptable answer. It'd have to be in GCC high. Same premise, just GCC
An
high
upgraded
is
license. Yeah.
yeah, it's a more secure environment than GCC itself. So it has more stringent requirements on the Microsoft employees and the data centers and where they are. So that's the difference between GCC and GCC high. If you want to talk about GCC high, I would suggest a one-on-one call. Use that's
It's very
it's
custom. Yeah.
it's a bear. Microsoft doesn't even have publicly released pricing on GCC high. You have to go direct and request it. Which we have clients in GCC high. We have clients who need CMMC level three. We only have a subset of our clients who require that though. Um, and they're like in the AI space. So if that applies to you guys, then we should definitely have a one-on-one call. It doesn't apply to most level three.
Guys, any other questions? If not, we will be in touch. Nate Wingreen will probably give you guys a call in the next week or two. I'd ask how you liked the webinar to invite you to our next and final webinar in 2 weeks, where we'll really dive deep into the assessment itself. How long does the assessment take? How do you prep yourselves for it? What happens if you have multiple office locations? What happens if you're totally virtual? We're going to talk about all that. This video will be sent to our video editors. They'll probably have it up. This recording today will probably be up on our YouTube in the next couple of days. We'll send you guys a link to that as well as our link to our YouTube video from the last session that we recorded.
Yeah. Just as a kind of closing remark, guys. I kind of want to be clear. I just told you what we recommend for most organizations, but that doesn't mean it's right for yours. And without us actually looking at your environment, the right path depends on kind of how many people are touching your CUI. So you'd want to kind of zoom out on your org chart. Who is touching this? Who would touch this? And so that coupled with what devices you're running, what line of business apps you're running, and what contracts you hold. All of this, we said this in session one, all of this is determined contract by contract. There's no overarching sort of mandate right now. It is contract dependent. And so like reading your contract language, um, you know, that's gonna that's gonna also kind of like steer you in which way you want to go.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what a CMMC assessment is, guys. It doesn't have to be this huge bloated $30,000 project coming in and assessing you. It could be more conversational based. It's usually a 45-minute, 60-minute meeting. Matt does a bunch of them by himself. I kind of phased out of that, but my goal from this webinar series is, we want to get into your specific situation and tell you exactly where you stand, which path makes the most sense for you. No pressure, I'm here to advise and usually it's less remediation and more building.
Yeah.
Conversation
That's
results, and this is the path that we recommend for you. Okay, how what does it cost to build it? How long does it take to stand it up? Can you guys
yeah.
just get it there? I want CMMC level 2 in a box. Okay, tight. That's our goal.
Yeah, that's important delineation here, guys. On our first webinar, we talked specifically about a lot of contractors that are larger. We expected, a lot of our clients are very big, hundreds and hundreds, sometimes thousands of staff that already had SOC compliance. They already had ISO 27001 compliance. They were already subject to HIPAA law and things of that sort.
Different starting points.
Different
Yeah,
starting points. A lot of those compliance frameworks overlap. And so generally we would come to them and say, we recommend an initial assessment to see how far off of CMMC are you?
right,
And then we'll find whatever gaps there are between their HIPAA compliance and CMMC, because some of them do overlap. And then we'll work to remediate whatever's lapping with their POAM and get them their SPRS scores so they can finally pass the audit for CMMC level two.
right.
For a lot of these smaller subcontractors, you're 1 to 10 staff, maybe 1 to 20 staff. You're starting out or you're just getting your feet wet into contracting. There's no need for an assessment. What is there to assess? There's no infrastructure built out already. So that is when we'd come in with the building process. We would recommend we'd start with a phone call, 45 minutes, we'd figure out what you guys need, and then we would build the infrastructure for you guys. And then that would just pass because we would build it to pass all the controls. And we would
That's
build it
correct.
custom for you.
Yeah, I want to follow up there and just kind of take a nod for the NAGC. Patrick Post and Senator J.R. Clays are kind of running the NAGC right now. And when they came to us, we expected, like Matt said, for there to be large organizations, government contractors looking to get this. And that doesn't seem to be the case. Maybe, but more so, he said the average member of the NAGC, hope he doesn't mind me sharing this, the
15
average
staff.
member, yeah, 15, 16 staff. So, the starting point is kind of similar for everybody. It's kind of like starting from almost nothing, right? To like, hey, what's this? I need this, I think.
It's honestly
So
kind of helpful for us.
yeah, yes, we want to cater this series to the proper audience, and that's what we're finding. So we're here to help.
Okay.
All right, guys.
We're going to end on that note. Thank you guys. We'll see you on the